Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Art Like Everything Else, the podcast. I'm your host, Simone, and today's conversation is going to be about change. Now, one might wonder what I might mean by change, and a lot of you probably already know. But we're going to look at the Webster's Dictionary definition just to be safe. So, Merriam-Webster defines change in the following ways: to make different in some particular, to make radically different, to give a different position, course, or direction too. Now, what I want to talk about is not just change, but the inevitability of change, and what that ignoring change and even refusal to accept change can do to you. Change is one of few guarantees we get in our life, but being unwilling to acknowledge or even accept your changed reality can prove to be detrimental. We'll be talking about two relatively old works of art to help us with our conversation today. And like always, I am always open for suggestions. So if you know of any cool works of art that you'd like to share, drop them in the comments below or send them to me on social media. The handles for the socials are also in the description. Like, comment, subscribe. And with that being said, let's get started. Our first work of art is a movie from 1993. That's older than I am. And it's none other than Groundhog Day. It's a 1993 fantasy romantic comedy. I didn't really consider it to be romantic, but hey, I'm not the one creating the genres. But this movie stars Bill Murray as our main character, Phil Connors. Now, while yes, this is a movie that is 31 years old, there are likely people who haven't seen it. I actually literally just saw this movie for the first time this week. So if you want a 100% spoiler-free viewing of this movie, you can pause here and return after watching the movie. If you don't mind, I'll talk briefly about the movie and try to leave some things out in case you want to watch the movie for yourself afterwards. So the movie Groundhog Day follows Phil Connors, who's an uptight and self-centered weatherman. He's going to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, which is a small town known for its annual Groundhog's Day celebration, to cover the unveiling of Punxsutawney Phil. So that's the groundhog based on whether or not he sees a shadow that's supposed to determine how much longer winter will be. So Phil Connors is really just snippy and entitled to his new manager and his camera person. And he's just being a bit of a butthead, to be honest. He's just a butthead for no reason. And he's even going so far as to be disrespectful to the townspeople of Punxsutawney, and he's calling them hicks, and he's acting and thinking like he's so much better than they are. Now, on February 2nd, Groundhog's Day, Phil gives a mediocre coverage of the festival and the event, and then he tries to rush out of the little town because he doesn't want to be there, only to be stopped by a blizzard that he thought was going to miss Pennsylvania altogether, making it impossible to leave the town that night. No matter how many times he tries to leave, he is actually forced to stay another night in Punxsutawney. In that little room in the bed and breakfast that he's in. He's staying in a bed and breakfast in this little town. Now, the next day, the same song is playing at 6 a.m. from the alarm clock radio, and Phil notices that the banter that's happening on the radio is also the same as the banter that was happening the previous morning. And everything sort of starts kind of feeling like the same thing as the previous day. He hears them kind of joking about the same stuff they're kind of joking about. But he thinks they're just trying to confuse him, and he makes a joke and tries to go about his day. But then he kind of does start to notice that literally everything is the exact same as the previous day. Him running into the man on the stairs, being asked the same exact question from the bed and breakfast host in the morning, even running into this really old annoying classmate of his, and then also stepping into this icy muddy puddle. It's really gross. But yeah, everything is happening. Everything's the exact same as it was the previous day. And so he finishes up this day, and at this point he's kind of just this has just got to be the most incredible sense of deja vu. And he goes to bed. But then he wakes up and everything is the exact same again. So it's the same banter. The same man on on the stairs. It's the same questions from the bed and breakfast host. It's the same annoying classmate. It's the same exact icy, muddy puddle. Everything's literally the exact same. Now he thinks something's got to be wrong. He tells his manager, her name's Rita, about what is going on, and she's like, you might need to go see a doctor. And so she tries to tells him to go see a neurologist. He goes to see the neurologist, and they're like, I don't see nothing wrong with you. You might need a psychologist. He goes to see a psychologist, and then the psychologist isn't even able to help him either. So he goes to a bar, he gets drunk because he just feels out of his mind. And then kind of while out being drunk, he realizes there's not really any consequences for his actions. So he goes kind of wild. He goes on a high-speed chase. He's driving on railroad tracks. He's outrunning the police. Only though he gets caught and he's arrested and he gets in prison. But that next day, he wakes up in his bed to the same song coming out of his alarm clock radio. And then Phil, after realizing oh, I can get away with a lot of stuff, he kind of starts to take advantage of these days repeating, and he starts to do all sorts of things. He's skipping out on his work. He's going to the diner. He's just binge eating a bunch of food. He's stealing money. He steals money. He's manipulating women into having one night stands with him, which is really gross. And he's doing all kinds of things because he just feels like there's no consequences to his actions anymore. He can manipulate things in a way that he wants to because he knows what's going to happen. He knows exactly how things are going to play out. He's able to make things happen the way he wants, and so he's taking advantage of it because he's not going to really get any consequences, because the next day he's going to wake up in the same exact spot and everything's going to be like a fresh slate. Though he then, after all of this kind of is happening, he starts to set his sight on Rita, his manager, and he's trying to seduce her. And so he begins to make note of the things she likes, the things she don't like, to try to manipulate her into making her feel like they're on some other type of level of connection, so that she'll be with him. And just so over the course of just a bunch of different of these loop days, he's been working up trying to seduce her, finding out her favorite drink, her favorite types of ice cream, what she wants in a man, what she likes in a partner, what kind of just the type of person, and trying to make it so that it seems like this is who he is, so that Rita will be with him. But it doesn't actually work. No matter how many times he actually tries, Rita always just says no. She's just no. And then so over the continued loop days, Phil actually does kind of start to get depressed. He becomes more and more depressed, and he actually does try to get out of this loop on multiple occasions by trigger warning, but for suicide mentioned, but he tries to commit suicide on multiple occasions, and he's hoping that it would help him to escape this loop, but it doesn't end the loop. The loop kind of keeps going, and so he actually ends up going to Rita again, trying to explain what's going on to him, because he's kind of feeling like he's out of his mind and he's hopeless. And so he explains his situation to Rita, and he's actually able to convince her that his reality is true, because he predicts everything accurately about what's going on. He's able to be oh, this person's about to say this person's about to say that, this person's about to come in the door and do this, and he's able to convince her that this is likely his reality, and so she actually hears him out. Now, Rita tells him to think of the loop as a blessing instead of as a curse. And the next day when the loop begins, Phil kind of decides that he's going to use the loop to be better. So he wants to be a better version of himself. So from here on, we kind of see Phil starting to work on himself. He's learning new skills, he's helping people around the town, and this sort of just continues throughout the loop. Just throughout all of these loop days, we kind of see him continue to work on himself, working on learning the piano, working on learning a new language, working on being able to what's it called? Ice sculpting. And so it has to have been going on for a while, because honestly, like, he becomes fluent in French, he becomes really, really good at ice sculpting, and he's just doing all kinds of really cool things, and he got really good at it. So like, it had to have like been in this loop for a really long time. Now, we then come to one loop day where Phil seriously and earnestly reports and does his job about Groundhog's Day, and it inspires and encourages a lot of people, and it even impresses Rita, who also later on, she sees how well liked Phil is around the town, and because she's hearing all these stories about all the really good things he's done, like all these errands he runs is to go and save other people around the town, because he's been in this loop long enough. He knows that, like, oh, these people, their car about to break down, I'm gonna go help them. Oh, this person is about to choke on a piece of steak, I'm gonna go help them. This kid's about to fall out of a tree, I'm gonna go make sure that kid doesn't hurt himself. Like, he's been in this loop so often, he's like doing this. And so now, all like, Rita is seeing all of these people big up Phil, and like, she's impressed. And so now, when Phil finally does feel as though like he's finally happy with the changes he's made for himself, and he feel like he's finally happy with himself, he actually goes to bed that evening, and he wakes up, and it's February 3rd. He's finally out of the loop. And so like, a little more happens in the movie, and so definitely check it out if you like, but that's where I'm going to end the description. So this movie was really interesting. It showed how important change is to one's own development, and that is not unlike our next work of art. Our next work of art is a film that was released in 1995. Also, technically older than me, even if it's only by like a little bit. But that film is none other than Toy Story. So the first one. So Toy Story is an animated film directed by John Lasseter. Now, just like the last work of art we discussed, if you've seen this movie and would like 100% spoiler-free watch, well, if you haven't seen this movie and you would like a 100% spoiler-free watch of the movie, I suggest you pause and go watch it now. Now, if you don't care about spoilers, I will kind of explain just primarily only the parts that I kind of need for today's conversation. And then I'm going to leave some things for you to discover on your own, should you want to check it out for yourself after this episode. So, the movie Toy Story follows a group of sentient toys belonging to a boy named Andy. Whenever he or other humans are kind of around, all of the toys pretend to be lifeless. But when not around humans, the toys are up and at them, so to say. So like, they're holding meetings, they're talking about expectations and plans and preparing for things that need to be prepared for, which in the case of this opening scene is a birthday party. Now, with birthday parties, especially for kids, there often comes new toys. And a lot of the toys are kind of understandably concerned that Andy might stop playing with them. However, Sheriff Woody, who appears to be Andy's favorite toy for years, doesn't seem all that fazed. As the one that all the toys kind of look towards for guidance, Woody actually comes up with a plan to send the little army men downstairs with a baby monitor so that they can hear the presents that Andy gets for his birthday, so they can like properly prepare for like if he gets anything that might replace any of them. And so, as it turns out, Andy did get a new toy, and it was a Buzz Lightyear action figure. So this toy, and all its fancy little features, so like it has like a working wingspan, it has the little laser pointer, and it even has like an arm flap and like a movable helmet. And so this toy becomes Andy's new favorite toy, and he kind of like replaces Woody pretty much. And he plays with him, and so like Andy ends up playing with Buzz all the time. Even with like having Woody play the bad guy that like Buzz is supposed to defeat. Now, when Andy is not around, Woody is obviously upset because he never thought that this would happen. He never thought that he would be replaced. And in talking to Buzz, he tries to tell him that he's a toy, but Buzz actually does not believe him. Buzz stays in like this reality like he believes is real. So Buzz believes that he is a space ranger in a foreign place, and he's trying to gather information and to kind of just like report back to his space command. Now, Buzz in his commitment to being who he believes he is, he impresses all of the other toys, and that kind of like endears like Buzz to all of the toys in the movie. Now later in this movie, Woody's jealousy of Buzz, like in his jealousy, he tries to knock Buzz behind a desk so that Andy can't find him and will kind of be forced to play with Woody more often, kind of like how things used to be. Only when he goes to try to knock him behind the desk, Buzz doesn't fall behind the desk. He falls out the open window behind the desk. And when Andy goes to try to find Buzz before heading out, when he can't find him, he just takes Woody with him on his outing with his mom. So Buzz sees through this. Buzz sees this and like so since he got knocked into the bushes outside the window, he sees that like Andy is getting into the car with Woody, and so Buzz actually kind of like runs and hops onto like the bumper of the car before it drives off of the drives out of the driveway. And so when they are at the place that Andy and when Woody and Buzz get to the place that Andy and his mom went to, Buzz gets kind of distracted because this is a space-themed pizza restaurant, and if we remember, Buzz believes himself to be a real space ranger. So he goes to explore because he's trying to get back to Space Command, where he believes he's from. Like Woody is following him and he's trying to get him to return with him so they can get back to Andy, so they can not be lost toys and try to go and just stay with Andy. And because they don't want to be left behind. But it's no use. They do end up getting found by some other kid, and they're taken to that kid's house. And it is while at this other kid's house that when Buzz is again exploring this new terrain, he finds a TV that is playing the commercial that promotes the toy that he is. It's sharing all of his little gadgets. It's showing all of his little like doohickeys and whatever. And you see Buzz kind of start to second guess his entire self. He goes to the top of the banister on the second story of the stairs, and he tries to fly across out into an open window. And so he jumps off the banister and he's trying to fly, but he falls down a flight of stairs and he actually loses his arm in the process. Like it just like falls off. He's a toy. Now Woody goes out to look for Buzz because he wasn't with Buzz when all of this happened. Like Woody kind of sneaking around this kid's house trying to find Buzz. He ends up finding that Buzz is in the kid's sister's room, and Buzz is kind of among his sisters, the kid's sister's toys, and he's having a mental breakdown. Buzz does not know what to do with himself now that all that he's come to believe, all that he's come to know and to see for himself is wrong. It's been wrong for a long time. And now Woody is able to convince him that his purpose is to make Andy happy. And with this new information, Buzz and Woody actually kind of work together along with some of the other toys in this kid's house to help them to escape and go back to Andy. And so I'm actually going to wrap up talking about the movie there. There's a bit more that happens after that, so if you like to watch it and you haven't, I recommend it. It is a very good movie. But yeah, this movie does a really good job of also showing what resistance to change can look like, and even what refusing to acknowledge the change happening around you could mean. And I hope to explore that as well as our last work of art more in the next section. Now, through both of these works, we witness change in our main characters and the resistance to change that causes them problems. Like I mentioned earlier, the only for sure guaranteed constant thing in our life will be change. There is no avoiding change. It comes for us all. It could be the solution to getting out of a monotonous rut you might find yourself in, like in Groundhog's Day. Change in that case could be imperative because maybe doing something differently could be what is needed for things to feel different for you. It might not be saving everyone from a small town from their personal inconveniences or learning to play the piano or learning French and how to ice sculpt like Phil Connors, but you can absolutely start with something small to change what's within your power, or just like your wheelhouse. Like for example, like what would journaling every day do for you? How might that change things for you? What would choosing to seek out or read a cool poem every day do for you? Like how might that change you? Change doesn't have to be like this grandiose thing to even matter. Maybe you want to learn how to read music. You can start that. Watch a YouTube video. Anything that could help your life to feel like more than that monotony. We saw it in the movie Groundhog's Day that nothing changed for Phil until he started to change. He did not get out of his time loop until he embraced that change that he wanted. Or maybe you're in a moment where change is happening and life as you know it feels like it is ending. All that you've grown used to has changed and you are not a fan of that change. Like when it came to Woody in Toy Story. We don't have to let this change be a hindrance to what could be a new experience. Woody got to do all kinds of new things as a result of this change. And like, yes, change can be difficult. I'm not saying it's easy. It can absolutely be heartbreaking, and I do not wish to imply that it's easy. Take Buzz, for example. His entire reality shattered before his eyes in Toy Story. That's a level of change that I'm sure would shake anybody. Like, seriously, can you imagine believing one thing to be true for your entire existence only to come across new information that sort of just upends everything you thought you knew? That is not easy to deal with. There's a lot of grief and just like mind breaking, which might explain the mental breakdown that Buzz experienced in the movie. But just like in the movie, sometimes we simply have to accept that maybe our purpose is also different from what we may have initially thought. Your purpose, whatever you may feel that is to be, can also change. You grow and are changed by all that you encounter. It is not always going to be possible for your purpose, your desires, and even your dreams to remain unchanged. And even that can be grief inducing. But it's okay. It's okay for you to change, for you to take in new information, and to apply and work with that information accordingly and safely, like, of course. Now, in fact, there are steps that can help in making handling changes a bit easier. According to Psych Central, some strategies to handle change include changing your perspective. We saw this happen in Groundhog's Day when Rita told Phil to think of his loop days as a blessing and not as a curse. And it was after this advice and after he reframed how he saw things that things began to change for the better, for him at least. Sitting with your feelings is also a great tactic to handle change, according to the article. And we see both Buzz and Woody get a chance to do that in the movie. Like right before they work together to escape the kid's house to make their way back to Andy, we see them kind of talking and we see them sitting with the reality of their emotions. And that can be really helpful. There's nothing wrong with taking time to sit with your complicated feelings. The article actually like mentions exercise too. While we don't see that in the movie, that is also like just a really good alternative, and that could be helpful for you. So I wanted to mention it. Now, the article also mentions surrounding yourself with a positive inner circle, which is something that happens in Toy Story. The other toys, after finding out that Buzz was okay, all began to be a good support to both Woody and Buzz. And this is kind of especially seen throughout the Toy Story sequels. But yes, finding people who lift your spirits and don't drain you can also be really nice for handling change. Now, I'm by no means saying that change is easy. Change is hard. Sometimes it looks like your entire life and all that you knew being dispelled right before your eyes. And other times, it might just be everything you've gotten used to starting to look different. It could even be that change is your only option to getting out of a loop you don't even know how you got in the first place. But either way, maybe change too can be an art like everything else. Now for our season 2 finale, All Moment is now upon us. Now if you're new here, an All Moment is just art that made me think this week. I consider a lot of things art, so it could be a quote, it could be a song, it could be a painting, it could be even be a tweet. And well, for this week's awe moment, it's actually a Tumblr post. This Tumblr post is by Tumblr user The Moon Loves the Sea. Now, I will have the quote up on the screen for those of you who are watching the YouTube video or Spotify video, and I will link the Tumblr user's blog in the description. But now I'm going to read the quote. So the quote reads as follows: "I'm increasingly worried by all the people on my dash calling themselves insane for loving stories in the way humans have loved stories our whole history. The brain rot is spreading. You mean you are changed by art? I'm not normal about this. You were moved by it. You felt human emotions about it. I'm about to be so annoying. You're going to talk about art. You're going to be passionate. You're going to think deeply about it. You're going to feel love for the work of someone's soul. You are not a consumer, and art is not a product to be casually used. You are a human, and stories are the beating heart of our humanity. You must feel everything, and you must know that it is normal." Now, I really love this when I read it because it is so true. It is normal to feel things about art, to talk about art, to be changed by art. It is one of the most normal things ever to exist. Just as change is the most constant thing in our life, to be moved by, to be moved to change by, to be moved to feel things about, and even to just want to talk about art is normal. It's part of why I like this podcast that I'm working on. It gives me the chance to not only talk about art and the ways it shows up, but even to think of how the art I witness, the art I view, the art I observe shows the very real realities of the things I love. And I can talk about how it impacts me, and I can talk about the ways that it's relevant to all the little things that make up the human experience. And I just think that's really, really cool. Now, like I mentioned last week, this is the season finale episode for season 2 of this podcast. I'm going to take a bit of a break and come back with season 3 later. I'll be posting any updates on my social media, so be sure to follow me there. The handles are in the description. Also, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, or follow, and check out any of the other episodes you may not have gotten a chance to check out. I will say that all of my episodes are kind of unique, and I think you can hear the growth as I progress from season 1 to season 2, even just throughout the episodes of season 2. And I hope to keep growing going forward. As always, thank you for listening, thank you for being, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!